What if I told you a guitar goddess was choked unconscious by a heavy metal god, had her own children brainwashed against her, and once made Eddie Van Halen leap from a fourth-story window wearing her clothes? She became a rock icon, lost everything in a Caribbean nightmare, and is still fighting to get her kids back. Here's how it all went down.
Like, subscribe. Thank you.
So there's Lita Ford, born in London, but raised in the sunny haze of Long Beach, California. This is back in the day. She's maybe 10 or 11 years old, and instead of playing with dolls, she gets obsessed with the guitar. Not just any guitar playing. She's hooked on the dark, heavy riffs of guys like Ritchie Blackmore from Deep Purple, especially Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath. Her parents, instead of telling her to do her homework, were her biggest fans. They were her best friends, her companions, picking her up from parties when she was too stoned to find her way home. They got her a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and she'd just sit there for hours slowing down Sabbath songs to teach herself every single note Iommi played. By 14, Lita was so desperate for a real Gibson SG, the same chocolate-covered one Iommi had, that she lied about her age to get a job at a local hospital, saved up every penny, all $375, and finally bought her dream guitar. This wasn't a hobby, it was everything. Then one day in 1975, when Lita is just 16, she gets a call from this weirdo music impresario named Kim Fowley. Kim, a he. He's putting together an all-girl rock band, and he wants her on the lead guitar. And this band would become the Runaways, with Joan Jett, Cherry Curry, Sandy West, and Jackie Fox. Fowley's whole idea was to mix this aggressive hard rock with this bad girl sex appeal. It was a formula for controversy, but just a few weeks in, Lita quits, packs up her gear, and walks out. The thing was, she was into men, and she didn't get that some of her bandmates, Cherry, Joan, Sandy, kind of liked to swing for the other team. It freaked her out. She had nightmares, thinking that she made the biggest mistake of her life. But after wrestling with it, she came to a realization that it wasn't a big deal, and as long as nobody tried to pick up on her, it was all right. So she went back. That wasn't the only problem, though. The band was also getting ripped off blind. They were selling out huge venues like the Whiskey A Go-Go for 4 straight hours. Alita would walk away with maybe a couple $100. They never saw any contracts, never knew how much money was really being made. Whenever she'd ask about the finances, people in their circle would just call her names and tell her to shut the hell up. On top of that, there was Fowley. Years later, in a documentary, the band talked about the verbal and all sorts of other kinds of tormenting that they had to go through from their management. Lita would later say that Fowley was actually scared of her and never tried anything, that he knew better. But the environment was toxic. By 1977, the whole thing imploded. Joan Jett wanted to go more punk, but Lita and the drummer Sandy West wanted to stick to that hard rock sound that they were loving. Nobody would budge, and so the Runaways were done. After the split, Lita was lost. She knew how to be the lead guitar player in a band, but a solo artist, that was a whole different world. She could shred, but she wasn't a singer. It was actually Eddie Van Halen who gave her the push she needed. He just looked at her and said, just do it. And so she did. She got serious, took vocal lessons, and taught herself how to sing and play at the same time. She even took the frets and position dots off one of her guitar necks, forcing herself to stop looking down at her hands and start connecting with the audience. From the jump, she created this metal goddess persona. She knew she was in a man's world, so she leaned into her sexuality hard, using it as both a weapon and a shield. The cover of her first solo album, Out for Blood, showed her in a leather G-string holding the guitar that looked like it was bleeding from the neck. Stores like Walmart banned it, not because she was barely wearing clothes, but because of the blood. MTV told her one of her songs, Hungry, was too sexual for their channel, even as they were playing tracks from guys that were way more explicit. So it was a constant battle. Guys in other groups would sabotage her gear before she went on stage. George Lynch from DOKKEN straight up told her, girls don't play guitar. People would watch her play a blistering solo and then ask who the guy was that actually played it. It got so bad she started touring as a 3-piece band, just her, bass player, and a drummer, so there'd be no doubt in anybody's mind who was making that guitar scream. And that came the mid-'80s, and with the fame came the rock royalty drama. Lita got engaged to her childhood hero, Tony Iommi of Black Sabbath. Should have been a dream, but it turned into a living hell. She lays it all out in her book, but she alleges he was a monster, fueled by insane amounts of coke that also left him impotent. She claims he was constantly abusive, once punching her square in the eye on a flight, and in another instance, choking her till she passed out on the floor. After the choking incident, she ran to Nikki Sixx's house for safety. Nikki saw the state she was in and apparently gave her heroin to take the pain away. The relationship was a toxic mess, with Iommi allegedly trying to poach her band members behind her back. Full-on nightmare. But the wild stories didn't stop there. There's the night with John Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora in her hotel room. So John starts puking in the corner, and the night ended with what she called girl on guy fun with Richie and producer Aldo Nova. She caught crabs from Dee Dee Ramone, and then there was the insane night with Eddie Van Halen. They were at her place, totally knocked out on vodka and messing around, trying on each other's clothes. Suddenly, her jealous ex-boyfriend barges in. Eddie, completely wasted, terrified, freaks out. So he hid in the bathroom, squeezed his entire body through a tiny window, and then dropped 4 stories to the ground below, scraping himself up in the process. He landed outside wearing nothing but her t-shirt and had to borrow a dime to call 911 for help. Amid all of this chaos, she somehow managed to write her biggest album, Lita. 1988, and the record went platinum, spawning massive hits, Kiss Me Deadly, Close My Eyes Forever, which was that iconic duet she did with Ozzy. That song, the number 8 hit on the Billboard charts, was written in a single night while she and Ozzy were completely hammered. Sharon Osbourne was, to put it mildly, not happy at all about their late-night drunken collaboration. But after riding the wave of 80s excess and success, Lita's life took another sharp turn. In '94, she met Jim Gillette, former singer of a band called Nitro, who I also covered in great detail. Check that one out. But this is after only knowing him for 2 weeks. So they get married. They had 2 sons, James and Rocco, and Lita did something nobody expected. She walked away from it all. The family moved to a remote island in Turks and Caicos. Gillette ran a construction business, and Lita became a stay-at-home mom, homeschooling her boys and living in total isolation. She said it was like her spirit was just being killed. That rock star identity, the very thing she fought so hard to build, was being buried. It felt like Gillette didn't want Lita Ford. He wanted her to be Lita Gillette, a wife, a mom, nothing else. And so the isolation was driving her nuts. The whole thing started to crack when Gillette began planning a reality TV show about their family, something called The Gillettes, an extreme American family. Lita, being Lita, wanted some creative control. She flew to LA for meetings to make sure the show represented her properly. When she came back to the island, everything had changed. She claimed her husband and her 2 sons wouldn't even speak to her. It's like a switch had been flipped. And this was the beginning of the end. In 2011, Lita filed for a divorce, and what followed was a horror story that overshadowed everything she had ever done in music. Lita actually became a vocal advocate for parental alienation awareness, claiming that Gillette had systematically turned their sons against her. She alleged that he had brainwashed them, convincing them that she was a danger to them, that she was going to hurt them. She even said he encouraged the boys to physically attack her. The divorce became final. Gillette took the boys and disappeared. For 9 agonizing years, Lita couldn't find her own kids. She searched all over the place, eventually discovering they were living with their dad in Tennessee. But the story they told was the polar opposite of hers. Gillette was awarded sole legal and physical custody. He claimed it was because of Lita's reprehensible actions and violent fits of rage. Police reports from Broward County surfaced stating that the boys told officers they were afraid their mom would take them out. They told police that she was the one who was violent, not their dad, and that Gillette never laid a hand on her. In 2015, the story got even darker. Lita's oldest son, James, who was a teenager by then, released a public statement. He flat out called his mom a liar. Said they hadn't been kidnapped. They had chosen to live with their dad. He claimed that a court-appointed doctor had told him and his brother years earlier that their mom was mentally ill. James accused Lita of being violent and threatening. He alleged she would try to make them hate their dad, berating them for watching movies with him. He said they told Child Services, the sheriff's department, court-appointed professionals that their mom was crazy, violent, and they were afraid that she would someday take them out in a fit of rage. He even pointed out the lyrics of her song Mother, which he interpreted as wishing their father was gone, a reason he wanted nothing to do with her. Gillette added that Lita hadn't paid a dime in child support. The battle became public, gut-wrenching spectacle of he said, they said. In 2019, Lita had a brief 10-minute mediation meeting with her sons. She said they just accused her of things, got angry, still believing the same crap stories from their dad. And she remains estranged from them, holding on to the hope that one day they'll realize they were turned against her. But through all of his personal devastation, the one thing she held on to was the music. In 2009, while still with Gillette, she released an album called Wicked Wonderland, which was widely panned. But after the divorce, she poured all her pain and anger into her 2012 album, Living Like a Runaway. It was a raw, cathartic record that critics and fans praised as a true return to form. her way of fighting back and reclaiming the name and the identity that she felt her husband had tried to erase. She started touring again, picking up her guitar and proving she was still the metal goddess. She received a Certified Legend Award from Guitar Player and an Icon Award from She Rocks, acknowledgments of her trailblazing career. Lita Ford's story isn't just about rock and roll. It's about a woman who fought her way into basically a boys' club, survived crazy relationships, built an empire, watched it all crumble into a family tragedy of unimaginable proportions, and still, through it all, Lita Ford still standing, still fighting with a guitar in her hand.